much for taking the time today to have a chat about the film because I watched it last month now and it's one that's really stuck with me.
Oh, good. Yeah, happy to. Thank you for taking the time.
And yeah, I think one of the reasons actually it stuck with me is because this is a film that goes to some really wild places and it does leave a lot up to the imagination and to interpretation if you're part of the audience. So I'm curious to
Yeah.
begin with what your reaction was when you sat down and you read that script for the first time.
I had to read the script like three times because I think it was even harder to wrap your head around without visual cues and without being able to see the story in front of you. And I said to Joel, and Joel and I, the director, Joel David Moore, and I have been friends for such a long time, and I was so excited to work with him. But I was like, Joel, I don't know if I get this. Like, let's go over, here's my interpretation. And it was ended up being really fun because he and I got to kind of go back and forth and because there is so much opportunity for the audience to speculate and to make their own opinions. I think it's a really fun, engaging film in that way, much like people do in the real world. Like it's what I loved about it too is that like you meet these two women, even Renata and there I'm sure immediately like we immediately make some kind of opinion or form some kind of opinion on a woman and 99.9% of the times they are so much more than that, and you get to see both of these women kind of transform throughout the course of the film. They get to be a multitude of things, and I really loved that. I think that's such a strong message for everyone out there, is that people, human beings, are so many things, and there's so much going on underneath the surface that we don't see. And in this film, you do get to see the transitions and the transformations.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like you said, this is a character with so many layers, but in quite simple terms, you get to play her maybe as, I'm getting careful of spoilers here, but as an antagonist and quite a sympathetic character as well as the story progresses. So how excited were you to explore those different sides of her and the way her actions really impact the wider story and the other characters as well, of course.
Yeah, I was really excited to take this on. I think it just is again such a clear depiction of a human being and what we are as humans. And so being able to kind of so clearly take on these different pieces of the character was really fun. Obviously, there's a little pressure that comes along with that, going, okay, you I feel like this is something that you dream of as an actor, and when it is so clearly put out in front of you, there's a little bit of pressure to do it justice. But yeah, I had such a great time with it. It was just challenging for sure, but a really great time.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned Joel, but with him being an actor as well, obviously stepping behind the camera on this one to direct, did it help having him to guide you when he, as a fellow actor, he knows possibly what you're going through and some of the scenes you might find quite challenging in telling this story?
Absolutely. I think many actors will tell you that it's generally a really enjoyable process to work with a fellow actor because they get it. They understand what is going on in these brains of ours and how crazy and chaotic it can be in there. And at the end of the day, you just want to make something really great. And it's extremely helpful when you have someone there that one is just as lovely and gentle and as intelligent a person as Joel David Moore is, but also someone who knows how to communicate what they're looking for and knows how to pull that out of a person. I think it's every actor's dream to have a director that actually knows how to direct you and actually knows point A to B to C all the way to Z of how to coax that out of a person. Because you do a lot of groundwork and background work on these characters, and you form your opinions and you bring to the table what you think is right. But it's so important, I think, to have multiple sets of eyes on these things. As I was mentioning before, like there's just a multitude of directions you can go with this, and so many kind of just tiny details that you can pull out to make a performance so much better. And so, yeah, I think, I just adore Joel, and it was thankfully such a wonderful experience.
Amazing. And of course, at the same time, you and Amanda are really at the heart of this film. And so to work with her, how important is it emotionally to have a co-star you can trust? And then obviously in the physical side, those water scenes, you
Yeah.
also trust your co-star in those as well. What was that like, that
Yeah.
sort of dynamic?
Definitely. I made it a point, and I think she did too, initially, like immediately to connect with one another and say, "Hey, I got your back, because it is, in this film you do see two women pitted against each other, and I think we've seen that for such a long time in Hollywood, and it's been a really nasty place. And there's been this beautiful movement of women going, no, 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 no more. Like, we're not going to do that. I don't know what you're so afraid of and why you're worried about us, having each other's back. But it was a really beautiful process, because from the jump, Amanda and I said, whatever you need to feel safe, I am here. And so it ended up being just the greatest, because it is a wild film, and you are really putting yourself out there in these scenes. And so to know that you have someone there rooting for you, and if you make a choice and it does fall flat, which happens, I think that's such a beautiful part of what we do, is like, if you want a really good performance, you really have to put yourself out there. And so being able to do that with her and go like, oh, I know if it doesn't work, she's like, you know what, dude, do it again. You're in it. Get your head in the game. You're super talented. I love you. You've been such a support system for me. Like, it was wonderful. It's kind of like, I think, textbook what you would want from that. And then same thing physically. And thankfully, we had a lot of people on set making sure that we were doing things in the safest possible way. So yeah, it felt, I love stunt work too. So so it was just a really lovely process. And we got to shoot in the Cayman Islands during COVID, and they didn't have COVID didn't exist in the Cayman Islands. And so just overall, we were, apart from the mental turmoil that we were putting ourselves through, we were really grateful.
Yeah, and what a strange dynamic that must have been to be in such beautiful surroundings and you're telling this really dark and sometimes quite twisted story.
I think that's part of what Joel really loved about it.
Yeah. And of course, Tom is another actor you spend a lot of time working with. So, what did you enjoy about exploring that dynamic? Obviously, you've both come from big franchises and had that in
Mhm.
common. But what I know when I spoke to Amanda, she wasn't actually familiar with his Harry Potter work. Was that the case for you as well? So you came in with fresh
Uh,
eyes, or?
I actually watched it during COVID, so I was really familiar. But Tom and I worked together years ago on one of my first films post booking Twilight, called The Apparition. He and I worked together eons ago, and so it's always really lovely to see people again that you enjoyed working with. Because this industry is so odd in that way. You spend so much time with people, and then you're kind of like, all right, well, you're gonna go over the pond, and I may see you in 10 years. I may see you in 2 months. Who knows? And so it's always really lovely to reconnect. And I think that he's such a fantastic talent, and such a lovely human being. It's always nice when you have people playing these characters that aren't actually horrible. They're really lovely. And so yeah, we had a great time.
Yeah, and to explore that relationship with him, because again, it's another one, just so many layers to it, and it gets quite, again, I'm being careful of spoilers here because I don't want to ruin anything for anyone, but it gets quite
Yeah.
dark as the story progresses. So that must have been quite challenging to have a relationship like that on screen, I imagine.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I think that goes back to creating like a safe place on set is so incredibly important. And I think that is part of the darkness of this film, is that these characters at times did not have a safe space. And it kind of goes to show that you really do have to care for yourself first and foremost. And a lot of times I feel like, kind of at its core, Some Other Woman really demonstrates what happens if you do put others ahead of you, their wants, their desires, their dreams, their emotional well-being. Whenever you allow that to happen, how your world can become a very dark, unsafe place. Thankfully, we didn't have that. It was all incredibly supportive, which you really need with the subject matter.
Yeah, I can imagine. And, well, I've got you mentioning big franchises. Obviously, Twilight, the legacy of that franchise, still talked about today. I know people adore Alice, a character you played.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that and the way that role has kind of followed you in a way? Obviously, you've moved on from it with great films like this, but do you like how that character has followed you in that sense?
I do. I just got this question I went to a fan event over the weekend, and it is kind of incredible how this franchise continues to live on, and how people are still so passionate about this franchise, and how it's still streaming. Like, I don't think we expected. There's no way to really expect any of this in the industry. It's so fickle, and you think you have something good, and it's not, and sometimes the opposite. So the fact that it still lives on as strongly as it does is just something that's beyond my wildest dreams. I could have never. My mom always says it's just a gift that keeps giving. Like it's wild, but it's really beautiful, and it just shows you how much these characters touch people. And so for me, I don't. I adore Alice. I loved playing her. It was some of the best times of my life. It was one of my first jobs. It really launched me into the career that I have, and so I feel like I can feel nothing but grateful when people want to talk about her because I get it. I get how special she is.
Yeah, did you happen to see they released a Lego Cullen house last week and there's an Alice minifigure in there. Did you catch that?
I did. I was so excited I made it in there. We were just going through boxes of things that are really important to us because of the fires, and
Yeah.
one of the boxes was the all of the memorabilia and things from Twilight, and my husband was like, "This is maybe one of the coolest boxes. You have a Barbie, you have an action figure, you have trading cards, and then right after that, the Lego set came out, and it's you have to feel nothing but grateful for something like that. It is very very cool, and I hope that I can get one."
Yeah. Well, it's an awesome role and awesome series. And another, of course, big franchise you were part of. People might not realize you played Batgirl in one of the Arkham games.
Arkham Knight, yeah.
Yeah, Arkham Knight, phenomenal game. I loved that when that one came out. But is that a role, you'd like to go back to, or just any of those comic book franchises you'd maybe like to revisit moving forward?
For sure. I think everyone has a difference in opinion on whether they want to be a part of something like that. But I obviously had a wonderful time when I was involved in a big franchise, and I think they can be really fun. And so, absolutely, I would love to be back in that world. That was one of the coolest things that I've gotten to do. Whenever I got the call for Arkham Knight, I was like, of course. I mean, similar to Twilight, of course. When they offer you the role, you're like, yes, absolutely, yes. I don't really care. I will be a part of that. That is so very cool. So yeah, I would love to.
Awesome. And back to Some Other Woman, like as I said, this is a really thought-provoking film. I've already seen a lot of debates breaking out on sites like Reddit, people trying to decipher this, that, and the other, which is always great to see. A film stuck with someone. But what will you take away, do you think, from the experience of shooting this movie? I know it's a few years ago now, but has it stuck with
Mhm.
you, this character, in any way, would you say?
Yeah, I think it kind of what I've touched on before is that it's so incredibly important to be true to who you are and yourself and find out what is important to you and what things you need to work on in yourself. Because I think once you start to let that go, whether it be for another person or your career or everything else that we have going on in this very overstimulating world, you really lose your center and you really allow your brain, I think, to start playing tricks on you and you can really fall into a negative mindset. And I think your brain is such a powerful tool and it can be a really beautiful support system for you, or it can be your own worst enemy. And so I think it kind of, reinstilled in me how important it is to do. Like for me, I think doing like, meditation, breath work, having time to reset your body and check in with yourself is so incredibly important. So I think that's certainly something that I took away. And it was in the midst of COVID, and I think it was extremely, extremely important. Not that it always isn't, but during that time, to have self check-ins.
Amazing. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm a big fan of your work for a long time now, and it was really great to see you in this film. And I can't wait for other people to check it out if they haven't already. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was great
Lovely
to talk to
meeting you. Have a great day. Thank so much.
you. You too.